I think for me, I'm always trying to get back to being that kid in my room and sketching and drawing. And I think someone who can sketch even just a little bit or has like nice handwriting, I don't know, I trust that person more.
I'm Brandon Dawson, and this is The Distiller, a podcast about how we find meaningful work and how we find meaning in the work we do. My guest for this episode is Jason Snell. Jason is currently the creative director for BLDG Refuge, a creative agency in Cincinnati, well, actually just across the Ohio River in Covington, Kentucky. But his creativity isn't about a job. Jason is an artist, a visual designer, a musician and a performer, a maker of creative things. He's one of these guys who's creative at his core and has spent his life finding ways to make that creativity into his work. And most recently, he's one of the artists who participated in Blink, a huge Cincinnati arts and culture festival that has drawn over 1.5 million people to downtown Cincinnati in each of its first 2 years. But we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Jason and I hung out over coffee on a Thursday morning in downtown Cincinnati at Fausto at the CAC. Fausto is the brainchild of brothers Tony and Austin Ferrari. After a dozen years creating restaurants in San Francisco, Tony moved back to his hometown to work with his little brother, and Fausto is just one of the brothers' ventures that are going strong in Cincinnati. It's located inside the iconic Contemporary Arts Center in downtown Cincinnati, and Fausto is part morning coffee shop, midday cafe, part California-inspired cuisine in the evening. Check out our website for photos by Angie Lipscomb as you listen to get a sense of the space. For people who do client work and corporate work, there's often a tug of war between the demands of the big client and the desire to do the more personal, passion-driven work. For Jason, these go hand in hand. He's doing the big jobs, but he's also made it a point to stay close to home, literally and figuratively, in his work. As someone who struggles with these questions, I enjoyed getting Jason's unique perspective on the balance between paying the bills and doing creative work that fills your soul. For Jason, that's about being in the community of art and design here in Cincinnati in ways that go beyond making a living and start to be about defining culture. Jason's work is ultimately about communication and visual elements that tell a story, and that starts with his story. So let's get into it. Here is my conversation with Jason Snell on The Distiller. Cheers, buddy.
Hey, cheers.
Good morning, and thanks for making it over.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
I'm excited to talk to you because, number one, the stuff that you do is stuff that I like and care about. And
That's cool.
I've been an admirer of your work, and I'm like just stoked to talk to you. But then the sort of piecing together of what you do, I'm really excited to talk about how you think about that.
Well, thank you so much. You're too kind.
Yeah, man. Well, let's start off. Tell in as detailed or succinct a way as you want to make it. What is your work? Not what is your job, but what is the work you do?
What's the work I do? You know, it changes, right? So, and I think it should change. And I think it's been changing for the past 20 years, getting out of school and everything. You know, I guess to walk backwards, I guess.
Sure, go for it.
You know, coming down from, just Dayton, Ohio, came to Cincinnati. I didn't know what I was doing.
You just come down for school?
Yeah, my teacher was like, hey, you should check out design. I'm like, all right, I like to draw everything. I remember as a kid, when I got in trouble, my parents would literally take away pencils and crayons, and I couldn't draw my Star Wars posters.
Oh, that's rough.
And, that pissed me off. So anyway, so I came down in Cincinnati. I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of turned down like a smaller football opportunity. I was like in a small school. I'm like, that's not really me. I want to figure out this design thing. What does this mean? What is art? Going to UC and DAP and kind of learned a lot of what not to do in the first couple of years, as I'm sure every kid does.
Sure, that's part of going to college.
Yeah. So getting out of there, man, all kind of stuff just started happening. Like, just to date myself here, like 9/11 happened, which was really crazy at the time.
While you were in school or just after?
Yeah, just after.
Okay.
And I'm living with bandmates, right? So we're trying to do this band thing, try to figure out what art is. And then also the riots happened here in Cincinnati.
Right.
So it was kind of like this mass exodus of all these creatives here in town. And, we thought we were going to be the next cool band. So we just tried to ride that. But it really kind of put things in perspective of like that, like hustle and that sort of fight to get clients, and no one was hiring.
Yeah.
So what does that really, what does that mean to actually get a job and a job in the creative field and things like that? So it was a lot of trial by fire. I kept hanging on to Cincinnati, saying there's, a lot of friends here from college, this underbelly of art that was still sticking around after the exodus of designers to other places and things like that. And there was opportunity where just through freelance and things like that, kind of went to Seattle and Austin for a couple projects. But it wasn't really until I got a real agency job from FRCH and the Brave Berlin guys, Dan and Steve there, that I kind of got my feet wet in this and was like, man, this is really cool. Okay. So getting into agencies, working at a lot of different agencies and seeing like the good and the bad and the terrible and the beautifulness and everything about that sort of industry kind of made me rethink about what is my work, which I think is your original question with that. So I really just dove into what does a community mean to me, and how does an artist live in a community, and what can an artist do in a community? So, that whole thing with like Hale Foundation popped up and People's Liberty, and it really started to make me think like you can be an artist and do really cool things for your neighbor. Right. And that's why I really wanted to put a storefront and come up with a crazy name and stick in town. One was my wife, Sarah, who moved back from school from Portland to have her dream job of helping to change over the Rhine. And I kind of took that and said, man, this is really cool. There's some bubbling up now of creatives and figuring out how we can get paid here in town. I think my work has sort of transformed from like trying to be in bands and make music to and to try to be really disruptive to now getting older and saying, how can I help those bands? How can I help younger artists and still be disruptive, but do cool things enough to, have a kid myself and pay for those things as we talking about earlier.
So now you're sort of the, I don't even want to say this, like becoming the elder statesman of that art and design community.
I kind of love that because I never thought I would be that, but, I think there's something important in that to kind of help out with the younger kids and guide a little bit, that sort of mentoring, coaching role. But I think, I've taught a couple classes at the Art Academy, and that kind of put things in perspective as far as like, whoa, I am getting old here, kind of thing. But, you can still get crazy and do anything you want. You can kind of wear a little bit of the I'm an old man hat and get away with it, rather than I'm the young kid and I'm a rebel. But all those things are still there.
I was talking to somebody that I worked with at ad agencies here in town, and we were talking about that getting older effect on being able to not apologize for stuff. And she was like, it's tenure. That's basically like, that's what we've got now. We don't have to apologize for like knowing what we know.
That's true.
And it's funny how that creeps up on you.
Yeah. And I think creeps is a good word because you just kind of look around and you just kind of have that moment of, oh crap, it is like right here. And I'm sitting in a room of, 22-year-olds. And, I don't really care what color that is necessarily, like is the feeling right?
Does it move me?
Yeah.
I feel like there was a day that if I had been paying attention, I could have marked the time where I went from being the youngest person in every room to the oldest person in every room. Yeah. And there was never a middle point. Yeah. Anyway.
But that's cool though, because that just shows like the longevity of that and why like design and art is important. And if you can stay that long in something that you're passionate about, then it means something. Yeah.
There's so much cool stuff though I had never even thought so there are people that listen to the show that don't live in Cincinnati. First of all, let's contextualize. DAP is the University of Cincinnati's Design, Art, Architecture, and Planning School, which is an illustrious design school. I mean, it's a school that people from all over the nation are trying to get into.
Right.
And a great program.
Yeah, and for me going there, it was kind of one of those things where I started in design and I kind of hated it at the time because I didn't just want to draw ABC all day.
Right.
And I didn't really know, now looking back to it, how important that is. I didn't really know what that meant.
Those design fundamentals.
Right. But then I transitioned over to, because I wanted to animate, I transitioned over into what was called just fine art at the time, but digital media was kind of crafted in that because I didn't know what to do with it.
Sure.
So, I had a professor, Denise Burge, she's amazing, and she was just like, go ahead and make those thick lines, it's okay,
Right on.
and like, a lot of those kind of professors would be like, there's no just, thick black lines. And I don't know, that really kind of allowed me to sort of open up to, the blending of like animation style and graphic styles and this kind of thing and fine art. And, I use those things every day now, 20 years later. And it's important to have, find those mentors and coaches, even if they don't know it. Like, she probably doesn't even know that now.
That was big to you.
Yeah, that
right.
I'm still thinking about those in those terms, which is great. And I think everyone needs to, like, even if you're not in the moment and know that, but just figure those kind of things out as you go.
Yeah.
Like, who is that you can kind of look toward?
Well, part of what's in that is that the style, design ethos, art ethos, what you were attracted to in 2001, maybe people are saying that's not what's happening right now, but like everything comes back around.
So does. Even now the music that I enjoy and made and inspired me, like the whole Seattle stuff, when I was in my late 90s, like kids love that now. And I go and I see a band, on a Thursday night here in town at your whatever watering hole, like they're playing that music. And that really excites me.
Yeah. It's funny. I was also thinking like people, again, if you're not from Cincinnati, certainly people know 2001, but they may not know what happened in Cincinnati in 2001, which is that there were riots, like we're at 6th Street, so 7 blocks north of us here on 13th and Republic, which basically had the result of sort of emptying out a lot of downtown and over the Rhine. That was where the real white flight, it was already happening because the jobs were dying, but that like made this whole area supposedly unsafe. And it took 15 years for the people on the west side to realize like everything's okay.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was one like little coffee bar shop called Caldi's.
Yeah.
That we would go to, and I probably saw you in there. I mean,
probably.
Like, that just that was like one of the only places it felt like safe to go and play music and see friends. But I remember the night of the riots, maybe might have been the second night, we were driving down and my band had a show there and I had my window cracked down. I remember getting hit with like a tomato from a kid and I looked over and like the parents like, and I'm like, no, we're here to play music. Like we don't, it's not like we don't care about this. Like
but we're here to do it.
We're part of the community.
Yeah, right.
So, that was another eye-awakening thing. And,
but I had
it was just,
I didn't live here then. I moved here later, and I didn't even think about like the impact that would have. Because in the 90s, in Cincinnati, again, I wasn't here, but there were, bands like the Afghan Wigs and the Ass Ponies and Over the Rhine and like a really strong music scene.
For sure.
And then kind of like an emptying out of that for a long, long time, for like a decade where it seemed like the emptiness of downtown during that decade sort of paralleled like the emptiness of the arts and music scene.
So true. We lost our way here and what it means to create and to rely on artists to help guide a community. I mean, there was none of that. And once there's a void, then there's an opportunity, right?
Yeah,
so all those things kind of started to happen. But it really did take a while. I mean, I think really, I guess you could say 5, 7, 8 years ago, right? It really was back, and it's definitely back now. And now you're seeing all these little niches and things like that. And that's great too. But it took a while. I mean, there was a lot of, what are we going to do here?
Yeah.
We're right. But as a band, it's right in the middle of the country. You can go to Chicago, Nashville, any of these places within 4 or 5 hours, and it's perfect for bands. So I think, with the art, there was a lot of bands that were like, well, we can get to our other shows here relatively quickly. People kept, going to Columbus and Cleveland, but
bypassing.
Bypassing. But now I think, if you have all these people, there's opportunity, right? So you have to figure it out as a community, and then that's not easy.
Yeah, it's funny because people don't know. Somebody described to me. They said like Cincinnati is like lettuce. If you don't come from Cincinnati, then you have no idea that it even exists and what happens there. So that for the rest of the country, Cincinnati, their picture was, it's iceberg lettuce. It has no flavor at all.
Right.
And I think that was true before I moved here, which was 2005. I had no picture. And then I moved here, and I'm somebody who cares about art and music and culture, and I find out that it's one of the most important cities in America for soul music. And,
yes, King Records, yes.
Yeah, and like there's all this history here that people don't know about that goes into, and it's important not to gloss over the fact that like there's a massive gentrification problem that has happened parallel to the resurgence of the arts in downtown and over the Rhine.
For sure.
And that's something that the city's still struggling with. But that process of living through this as an artist and sort of finding your way at a time where there was maybe an absence of mentors and an absence of examples, but also the opportunity to kind of make it whatever you wanted to make it.
Yeah.
Is a pretty important foundational time.
It's so true. And, whether you're impressionable or whatever you want to call it, you're seeing all this stuff. It sinks in, you're seeing those things. And, for me now, I think of these like lost neighborhood heroes and how I want to help bring those back to the surface. Things like Ezra Charles or King Records, these things that were important that, what angers me a lot is the city doesn't know their history.
Yeah.
And that is dangerous because we need to know that. And, a good friend of mine, he was a session musician, played a lot in Nashville, toured a lot around the world, a bunch of different bands. He was from Delaware, Andrew Higley, and we went to school together. We were in bands here and stuff like that. Photography we were talking about earlier. But he said when he was growing up in Delaware, like they knew everything about history on the East Coast. He's like, I can tell you anything and everything that happened in our town.
Yeah.
And that just kind of stuck with me because I'm like, man, it's not true for everywhere else in the country about
the
knowing.
stories get lost.
Yeah, and to me, that's such a really important thing now with my work and my art and my design. And I guess it's like it's part education, part history, part just telling a cool story, you know, and what that is.
And there are people who are doing that. That's, I interviewed Yemi on the show.
Yeah.
Who's doing but the thing is, Yemi and JP, go back episodes if you're listening to this and you don't know who I'm talking about. I don't know what episode it is off the top of my head, but Yemi Yediran is one of the filmmakers who made the Queen City Kings documentary.
Yes, yep.
But they're struggling to get it out. And I would think that would be something, it's beautiful, and I would think that would be something that the city would be championing.
Right.
That the mayor would be trying to get. I mean, he says he cares about King Records and the legacy, that they would be trying to get stuff behind it. So it's just, you're right, like the city doesn't seem to care about its own legacy in terms of the murals are great. And I don't mean that. The murals are great. We've got a lot of beautiful murals that celebrate the city's history, including Ezra Charles and James Brown.
Yes.
But like you got to put the money where your mouth is in terms of telling the story and getting it out there.
And I think it is education. I think kids, and that's part of the process of why we're doing the Ezra Charles, like world's first interactive bronze sculpture at Laurel Park. One of those reasons is, you can slap a sculpture up and that looks great and it's cool and it'll be there forever. But if you don't have some sort of programming with that to let kids know why this is important, why this is here in your neighborhood, then it's not going to go anywhere. And I feel that's the same for, what we're talking about with a lot of the important things that happen in this town.
Yeah.
And, I know we all need to, have clean streets and that's great.
Sure.
But part of the education is really knowing your history. And you can put that, and it's the same with like math and science. If you put it in terms where kids can have fun with it and be proud of that when they walk around and realize these things, like I could do that, that's gonna change perception. And 20 years from now, our city will be the best. It can be because of those tools, so. Yeah.
And it's coming back up, things like Blink that you were just involved in, like there's a lot of great stuff happening now. So let's like do a little connecting the dots. You graduated from DAP. What was your actual degree from DAP?
Fine arts, BFA. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're an artist. This is a common problem working in the agency world. So many artists who are doing industrial design or product design or just advertising design and making banner ads because that's the
Right.
only way that you can actually make a living.
Yes, yeah.
How did you, and you did that, you
yeah.
worked in agencies and you did that stuff, but at
Yeah.
a certain point, you decided this doesn't satisfy me.
Right.
How did that happen? And then how did you actually make the decision that you were going to do something other than, because the agency world is seductive.
Yes.
It pays well.
Great word.
You get
Yeah.
to say that you work on these giant brands.
Yeah.
You know, you get to say, well, I'm not painting my masterpiece,
Right.
but I designed that national
Yeah.
Clorox ad.
You know, and all that stuff, I still get excited about.
Sure.
Right? Like, I think there is, like, that's such a great word because it lures you in and there's opportunity there. Mm-hmm. There's plenty of work there.
Yep.
And there's the steps to grow and to kind of keep pushing forward. You know, but for me, I think it does kind of go back to this sort of like independent music kind of feel of that chip on your shoulder, like, oh, I haven't made it. You know, I can see where that light is. How do I get there? How do I get there? So for me, you know, I just kept raising my hand and asking, hey, can I do this for you? Can I do this for you? I had some friends who are killing it still. Patrick, for the Raconteurs, you know, he was with the Greenhorns. Love that band. Always watched them. Like, you know, they worked at the Comet, Lil Jack, things like that. And then, you know, all of a sudden I'm like, hey, can I do a poster? Can I do your website? You know, they get signed to Third Man. They're touring with Jack White. They're still in Jack White's band. It's really their band, really. I mean, they're the backbone of that stuff. But, you know, it's things like that. You just keep, you know, you keep raising your hand. I can remember getting more work at night doing like posters and website stuff for like bands and these other little things that started creeping in where I was like, all right, I bought a house, but I don't have any kids. I don't have a lady. I don't have a significant other. So I'm just going to make this jump, and I'm going to do it at my dining room table. And I knew I kind of had I had like a month. I didn't have, you know, people sit there like, get your 6 months. No, I just had an opportunity where I was like, all right, I just feel like enough is enough. I worked on Prilosec for a whole year. I don't even have heartburn. Like, we got to change something. So that was like that big, the big light that went off. And hey, you know, a lot of people need Prilosec. That's great. Use it. Cool. Whatever.
Sure.
Don't use it. But for me,
do what you want.
Man, you know, I didn't know I was going to work on that for a whole year. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? So I was able to just say, you know, and it was scary. And from that, you know, I said I needed a weird, wild name in the animation world because all these little pop-ups were starting off with these like small person shops that were crazy names. I was like, I need a crazy name. I got a little bit of Viking blood in me. You know, We Have Become Vikings. Like everything in the design world is you know, like a brand that's coming forward. And the Vikings were the first to kind of to trim the corn branding. And, you know, branding's in everything from the coffee you drink to who you vote for. You know, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a weird name. It's way too long. But, you know, like old ladies would remember that. So I was like, all right, we'll stick with that. And that kind of built, you know, a 12-year career with that stuff till recently.
So let's stop there for just a second.
Yeah. Sorry,
No. I just want to continue. So you started a shop, and the shop was called We Have Become Vikings.
Correct, yeah.
And it was an independent design shop. It wasn't just design, it was production.
Yeah, it was anything I could kind of get my hands on. You know, a lot of it was doing like band stuff for friends.
Yep.
There was some branding stuff there, but there's a lot of digital things too. A lot of video and motion graphics. A lot of motion graphics because that was a big passion of mine.
And so
Still
was that. Did you make a break? Did you get out of the agency world in order to start that, or were you doing both for a while?
Well, I was doing both, I guess, for like a year. But man, that's just too hard to try to hit deadlines at night and then getting up in the morning and putting on that smile and everyone knows what's up, you know?
Yeah.
And that was a little bit too before the whole Instagram stuff.
Okay.
So, you know, Facebook's there. So, you know, you want to post some things, but you're like, oh, somebody's going to get pissed off they see this. So
right.
I guess that still happens, right? But, But that was the break. I was like, all right, you know, I have enough couple video projects coming through the door that I can kind of pay for this house still.
Yep.
And I bought the house up in Northside. A lot of my friends live there.
I live there.
At that point, it was relatively affordable.
Not anymore.
Stuff. Yeah, I was like, holy cow, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you made the leap. You started We Have Become Vikings. You described it a little bit. You're doing design work, just standard, branding and design work, but you're doing motion. You're doing poster design and production.
Yeah.
You guys also did a really interesting, you're doing Ohio branding and Cincinnati teas and sort of both what, I don't know what the word would be, more corporate branding, but also really accessible consumer branding type stuff.
Right. And a lot of that, I look at the Robin Hood model, right? Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to do some of those things for the Priloseks of the world, right?
And the ones that are going to pay the bills.
Yeah, and it's always been that way, I feel like, even with Robin Hood. To get those things where you can pay to do some cool things for your friends.
Yep.
And that's where it's like, okay, I'm the art director here. I don't have to speak to anyone else here. We're just going to have some fun and do some cool things. But the reality of that stuff is it catches up with you too. So that balancing act is quite a juggling too. Mm-hmm. And I took on some projects. Again, raising my hand and not saying no. When you don't know where that next cup of coffee is going to come from, you just kind of go for it. Yeah. And that really opened some doors up to me. And I was able to kind of hire some friends. To do some various different projects with that stuff. I was able to kind of get out from my dining room table, which was awesome, mm-hmm. to a spot down and over the Rhine.
Yep.
So that was a big sort of jump for me to kind of say, hey, if I'm going to stay in Cincinnati, I want to have a little brick and mortar. And,
space.
And try to figure that out. And the first year was such a blast, kind of not knowing what was going on and over the Rhine. And I mean, literally across the street on Vine Street, there was a bootleg car wash. It was really kind of awesome, but funny. And just all kind of things were happening at that time down there. And nothing was glossy yet, I feel like.
Which it certainly is now.
Yeah. Nothing was really glossy down there on 14th Street,
Yeah.
But it was a lot of learning and, mm-hmm. a lot of now I got to keep books now. Math. We gotta think about these things. We gotta think about how we're gonna pay these people now, and all that kind of stuff over 10 years. It's hard, and it doesn't get any easier unless you hire the right people too. So, I had mentors, whether they know it or not, but I kind of befriended Aaron Draplin, who's a mega superstar in the design world, another big guy. We kind of met up and we never really collaborated, but we've. Well, I guess my band collaborated with him at a couple talks, but it was those things where I looked at those guys and I was like, man, we can do that stuff here. You don't have to be on the coast to do those big projects, and just keep asking, raising your hand, asking, hey, I can do this, I can do this. Yeah. That led me to a pretty amazing opportunity. To go to Amazon for a top secret project, mm-hmm. which I worked on Project B, which was the Amazon Fire Phone. Okay. I went back and forth for a whole year. Couldn't tell anybody about it. This was going to be this phone with 5 cameras on it. It was going to be this whole gaming. It was like a gaming phone, working with 300 people to do this thing. It was just going to be crazy, crazy madness. But at the 9th hour, Bezos was like, nope, we're going to go Android with this thing, and no one bought it. And it was I kind of came back from Seattle with my tail oh, it's going to be cool. I ended up buying one because they didn't send me one or whatever. I just think everyone was this thing sucks or whatever. But, you just learn so much from those opportunities
but how do you as a Midwest designer with a fleggling company, how do you even get to throw your hat in the ring for that?
Well, the internet is a crazy place, as we all know.
That's the truth.
And, it was one of those things I could remember pulling up email and finding all the agencies that I thought was cool and sending them my stuff. Not sending them some crazy PDF that would clog up their, email, but sending them hey, and making it very personable. Hey, I followed your work. This is really cool. I found not a contact, but someone there that would maybe read it. Mm-hmm. So I probably did hundreds of those, just really digging in and taking time to find out what these people did, what they, what their passion were at these different smaller agencies. And through that, I got connected with a woman in Austin named Roka. She's awesome. She kind of gave me an opportunity to kind of come down work on F1 branding in Austin, which was a crazy project. And then she flew me out, kind of set me up with Amazon. But you find these contacts just through. I found them just through email and just reaching out and saying, "Hey, like I have time. How can I help you?" And I wasn't even talking about money. I'm just like, "How can I help you? I want to like do things outside of town." Which we're sitting right now in this amazing space, and this reminds me of another story I got to tell very quickly. Lightborn gave me an opportunity to go there and work, and I learned so much there. But one day they called me up, and they were like, "Hey, we got to let you go." And I thought I was gonna like become an art director or something. I was kind of cocky at the time, or whatever. And it just like it crushed me. But what I didn't realize was, man, them saying, we can't afford to have you on our staff right now, made me even work harder to kind of go and say, "Hey, I can do this. I can do this on my own as well." So those kind of like those little things of people telling you no are like okay.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we struggle with that because there is a lot of no. There's a lot of people in the design world, and you work for even a P&G or a Kroger, so many people are going to tell you no until you get to the yes.
Where does your confidence in that come from, though? Because I think that's the thing, that's why I probe into that a little bit, is we could say, raising your hand on stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't raise your hand if you don't have the confidence that you can actually do the work.
Yeah,
that's a hard thing to balance. I think a lot of people, especially younger people, when you say, well, you just got to put yourself out there, don't know how to do it in a way that ultimately isn't kind of douchey and overconfident because they don't have the chops to back it up. And so how do you balance humility and that approach that you said, what can I do, how can I help you, with also believing in yourself that if somebody tells you no, that doesn't damage your belief in your competence?
That is an awesome question. And I think if I really think about that question, obviously you got to do the work, but everybody already knows that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's...
I'm actually not sure everybody does. And I don't mean to...
do the
I'm
work.
not going to say millennials this or whatever this, but I mean, it comes down to...
You got to do the work.
Yeah.
But for me, I think it was having another passion. It was, you call it side hustle, call it whatever. Being on stage with just a mic in your hand or a guitar in your hand, that gives you confidence. Going and speaking in front of people, dropping that curtain and allowing for mistakes, where, in design world, you can be in an island, you can hide your, what do you want to call that? You can hide your goods, you can and do your thing. And then
lean into what your strength is, and
and then you go, here's a shiny package. Look, I just whipped it out. No. You're working on that stuff. There's a lot of different things that you have to take into account. But I feel like the confidence to be able to say, hey, I make great work, and check this out. I feel good about it, and the whole not being douchey about it too. That's a whole other thing. There's a lot of that too, because maybe you're faking it or whatever. Or you're relying on other things that are beyond whatever. But I feel like when I see other people have these other passions that sort of ladder up to that creative, I don't know, there's just more meat on the bone there.
Yeah.
And I've always find just putting myself out there in a band or something like that, and I know you know about that, where it's just you're putting creative out there and it could fail.
Yeah.
That builds confidence.
Taking the risk.
Very, very quickly, I feel like. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great answer. I feel like I have a chip on my shoulder against specialization. It's my own deal, but that and I think often if you hear people talk about building your own business, you're going to see a lot of answers that are out there that put all your thing into this one thing.
Right.
And the fact that you're saying, no, put your thing in a number of things, develop confidence overall about who you are, learn to fail in one area so that you're not terrified of failure in another. That's such a great answer.
Well, thanks. And it's just true. We were talking a lot about, this is the other side of the coin, but Jeff Bezos, right, in Amazon, that guy, and right now we're talking a lot about electric cars and electric vehicles and what's next for that stuff, as a part of my day job without giving too much away. But what's crazy about that is we talk about this whole thing that, Jeff Bezos isn't just putting a bunch of money in one electric car company. He is going to spread that thing out and see which horse wins.
Yep.
So I think that same thing can kind of, if you're creative and you have ideas, people are looking for you, and you do need to raise your hand, and you need to be confident. And I think if you're doing a lot of other things, and that's what we talked earlier about kids playing sports.
Yep.
I get angry now. And, my kid's only 5 months old, but I get angry when, like, the society puts pressure on kids to play one sport.
Yeah.
And they got to be great at it.
No.
And you got to do it full every season is that sport. I'm like, no way. Like, let them breathe. Let them fail. Let them go try field hockey, volleyball, baseball. Man, like,
do it
you
all.
just don't know. You can't. Yeah. So putting all the eggs in a basket. Man, what if you're unhappy in a year? Like,
Right.
That's going to be terrible.
That's what we were talking about. I got a kid who's trying to make decisions about college.
Yeah.
And I want to tell him, like, maybe don't go to college.
Right.
Like, maybe go experience 3 or 4 years worth of stuff and travel the world and see what's out there before you make decisions that are going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars about what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Yeah.
But I think that's illustrative of, like, how we all get so myopic about I got to do this thing. And you used the word hustle earlier. So much, especially if you're working for yourself in any capacity, so much of it comes down to the hustle.
Yeah.
And I think people think that the hustle is my social media presence or my, like, singular focus on this thing. But when you look at, like, what makes people successful, it's putting themselves out there in a number of ways.
Yeah.
Bezos is a great example. Google does the same thing. Like, they're launching hundreds of shitty products.
Right.
In the hopes that one will break through.
Yeah.
And if one does on the scale that they do it, then they make money off
Yeah.
it. So they can afford for Google Wave and Google Buzz and Google Trash Can to fail. Because they've got their, individuals can do that too.
Yeah.
And I think that diversity of experience and capability makes you, as a musician, it's a very simple, like, as a guitar player, I become a better guitar player if I learn to play piano because it triggers different parts of my brain
So
and the way
true.
that I think about music differently.
So true.
In anything that we do, diversifying your skill set makes you better at the thing that is your core.
Yep.
If you have a thing.
Well, I went back and I said, there's all this awesome technology with tablets and things now. I want to go back and draw a lot. And for me, I've always had it there, sitting there and doing a little bit. But now you're seeing, like, these challenges like Inktober and all these kind of things, like, which I'm behind in right now. It's okay. Blink happened. But, it's these little tasks. Like, that's the hustle.
Yeah.
It's like giving yourself these little tasks to do, like, daily.
Right.
Like, call up a friend or reach out or take that cup of coffee, run down the street and see that performance, go in that smoky bar or whatever and see that show. Those are that's almost the hustle. Like,
that's so good.
It's not like you said with the social media or making sure that you got 10,000 followers. Yeah. I mean, that's nice and that's awesome.
Sure.
And we all want that.
It's part of the business these days too.
Yeah, of course.
But that's so good. I mean, I was, my 2-year-old is sick, so we were up at like 3:00 in the morning, and then I couldn't go back to sleep. And I'm thinking, like, I'm thinking about this book that I want to write, and to hear even you say that right now, that the hustle is make the phone call. The hustle is do a doodle or a sketch. The hustle is actually sit down and write.
Yeah.
And develop your craft.
Because those are hard. Like, that's hard. Like, being consistent. Consistency is hard. That's what I feel like, because you get to a comfort place and you're like, I got that. I can always do that. And that's cool. But I don't think that's consistency. Consistency is like always doing something well, I feel like, you know? And that means you got to kind of change a little bit and keep at it and doing all those little things that kind of add up to that bigger picture.
Yeah, develop those new muscles.
Yeah. And that's hard always, like trying to make that phone call or make those things. Because, I mean, life, hey, it's busier than ever. There's more toys to look at. There's flashy lights everywhere.
More things clamoring for your attention. And
that's why I think, like, these things where you can actually have conversations and talk to humans, like, that makes it even just so much more important.
I like it. Yeah. This may be a little bit of a strange question. I want to talk about the word design. Like, there's so much, there's two words that, like, are kind of centers of your world. One is design and one is branding, that are so loaded. Right now.
Yeah.
What do you think? You started out as an artist, as an artist in the commercial world, you're going to get into the design world. Design can be product design, it can be corporate branding, it can be sketching.
Right.
It can also be design thinking and a way of approaching work.
Right.
So, like, how are you thinking? You started out as an artist. You started out drawing Star Wars drawings in your room. Now, when you think about your work and about the design aspect of your work, do you think about it in a meaningfully different way, or is it still at the core?
No, it's a great question because, design for me, it has to like cross barriers. It has to be a little bit of difference. A lot of people are like, art's not design, design's not art. I don't know why it can't be. I think there's always going to be clients that are going to like pay you more or pay you less. And I think that's art and design. I mean, it's like there's a scale of all that stuff. Sometimes your family members are the hardest to work for, whether it's art or design, and it could be easier than the biggest client sometimes. So, I think for me, I'm always trying to get back to being that kid in my room and sketching and drawing. And I'm still thinking about that in terms now. But I really feel like it comes down to the ideas. And I think the biggest companies in the world want to pay for big ideas. And, I think someone who can sketch even just a little bit or has like nice handwriting, there's something that, I don't know, I trust that person more. I know that seems weird, but it's like, if you can do something with your hands, like I don't know.
Is that craft?
Yeah, maybe that is craft because, I look at certain artists or designers who maybe, are great storytellers, but maybe can't put it down to a piece of paper or shoot a photo of it or do something. And not to say writing isn't a craft, but even just like handwriting it. Like to me, that's like a craft in there. You're not just typing or saying it in a Siri or something like that. To me, there has to be a craft element to it. I mean, ideas are amazing and people pay big money for that. But if you can't articulate that, and I'm trying to get better at that every day because that's the branding, right? You have to be able to articulate your idea and why does this little mark mean everything for your company?
Yeah.
I mean, that can be hard to really sell that idea as an artist to a big company, right? Because they don't get it or they don't see it. But if you can pull out a piece of paper and sketch with them, it's just like everything opens up,
Right.
So,
yeah, there's something about whether it is, like you said, whether it's writing or whether it's the design, whether it's telling that story in words or, on paper. It's like, how are you physically engaging somehow with the idea?
Yeah, just like even like a scrap of paper or a whiteboard, something like that. We had a client the other day that came in and he's kind of a mad scientist. And he's like, do you have a whiteboard? And he just started drawing this like technology and we lost it. We're like, this is where it's at. Like, man, if somebody that that runs a company can do that, like, why can't we all, tell a story or have a note, and do these little things, keep field notes, whatever that is, those kind of, and that's why that becomes even so important as we progress as society because all this stuff, digital technology around us it's so easy to be like, hey, Siri, remind me, blah, blah, blah. If you don't write it, it's like you're writing it down, you're sketching it now to remember it later. You might not even go back to that book, but you're going to, your subconscious works crazy and you're going to remember what you sketched or wrote in your brain later. So that's just, I don't know, I feel like that helps me kind of keep things like in line.
What do you think about, I often think about the concept of branding, which is sort of hand in hand with design in this context. Do you think that branding, the way that we talk about it and understand it now, especially people in the advertising world, how am I going to phrase this, is damaging us culturally?
Yeah, I mean,
because I mean,
it is. The importance of it.
Yeah.
It's almost, it can kind of get silly.
Well, it lessens the impact of where it's needed and when it's done well. And then it also pollutes these things that don't have any business. When you get people talking about, like in corporate culture and offices, people's personal brand. And,
right. I mean, it's just buzzwords, right?
Well, of course. It's all this jargon.
Yeah. I love branding. I love a little mark that represents this whole large thing. I do love that. I think it gets a little goofy though when everything has to have a brand. sometimes just the activations and the interactiveness of, whether it's a space that ladders up to a brand. I mean, those are more important. That's what's making that little mark important is all the things that you put in the stew that really make that incredible. So like the importance of that, I mean, there's depending on probably who you talk to, there's so many levels that it can be this great, amazing thing, or it can just be trash, you know? And sometimes when I just see like a nice form and it's simple and my mom can draw it, like, wow, they nailed it. That's great.
Yeah.
And sometimes when it like ladders up to like, it's some, crazier mark, and it ladders up to someone's like, personal thing of belief and this is their line of products. I don't know. Sometimes that's a little goofy. And then you start talking about like, is a company a person company? And that stuff is just like kind of out of control with things, you know?
Absolutely.
It's like, sure, you want to put your name on it, but what's the Tommy Boy line about like I can slap a guarantee on a box of, I don't know. Until you get a guaranteed box or whatever.
Right. It doesn't change what's in it.
Right.
No, just in terms of like finding, we talk about the show as, finding meaningful work. And it's like there's something antithetical to this overemphasis on branding. Yeah. That it becomes, and the irony is that what you just described, a great brand mark and really good branding has all of this meaning underlying it that you don't have to explain. Right. But what it's become is that if I slap a mark on this, then it's a shortcut to doing all of the thinking.
Yeah, wow. That's a big one right there. That's actually, the thinking of that is crazy, because I mean, I do that every day, right? Like trying to come up with, and for me too, I feel like strategy becomes way more important than even the brand mark anymore. Like, and I don't think as sort of a design society or whatever you want to call that, the community of design, like that's sort of like the secret sauce is strategy. And like, what is the meaning behind that? And how can you push that? What's the story there? Because that's really what you're looking at. Strategy is story. Like, what's the story there? Like, what does this mean? How does this mean? And, man, good writers can kind of find a way for anything. But when it's done well and the people that are running those companies, it could be the smallest company to the largest company, if they really are about that, then it'll make that shine, you know? And I think now, again, with technology, you can kind of see through a lot of that stuff. Yeah. But still, even when you can see through some of this stuff, people still people latch on to some of that stuff and champion it.
Tastes just like the real thing.
Right. But, maybe it's just like us as being creatives, we can kind of see through that more. But I hope as a society, we are better than that.
Well, it seems like, to me, that comes back to whether it's music or branding or design or writing, does it have a soul?
Yes.
Like, is there any actual soul in it?
Right.
Is there, you scratch below the surface, is there anything actually there? And if you're looking for that, you can sense that. Yeah. And that's in the craft of design. That's being able to draw a line meaningfully. Yeah. Like
a meaningful line. I like that. Yeah. Because that's writing and that's design. That's great.
Well, let's talk about like the evolution of your work now, because you started We Have Become Vikings. Yeah. And then you recently, I don't want to get the words wrong. Sold it or merged with BLDG.
All of it. Yeah.
So you'd created this business. You're creating a name, and then now you've merged with or been subsumed by or whatever. You tell me what the right thing is. But you went through a transition of that business. What happened, and how did that come about?
Yeah. Well, building We Have Become Vikings for, I think it was 12 years. A lot of things crossed the plate that was hard. Some were easy, some were hard. The things that I kept tripping up on were things like payroll, taxes, bookkeeping. I just felt like I never got that right.
You mean as an artist, you weren't just naturally falling into all this?
It just drove me crazy. And we talked a little bit earlier about the whole thing of like chasing down clients. And that's hard because sometimes you just want to cook. Sometimes you just want to make stuff, you know? And that tripped me up a lot too, like just chasing down checks. Like, hey, I rushed to get this done for you. Can't you can you get the check over? Like, come on, I got bills to pay. Becoming other like companies' banks.
Yeah.
Like that's hard. That's hard for a designer. And then I found out that I was having a kid. We planned on that. It was awesome and amazing, and all this stuff kind of. My brain started thinking about like what's the best future for Vikings and my team. I mean, Phil, Matt, guys that I've had for the last few years. I want those guys to have health care. Like that's important stuff. They want to buy houses. Like I want to give them security. And I talked to Jay Becker and his wife Kate at BLDG a few years ago. We always kind of pitched for work against each other. Sometimes we'd win, sometimes we'd lose. Always loved being involved with a lot of their studio shows that they had. So I kind of did a lot of painting and illustration for stuff. We collaborated on a few projects. They said, hey, our door's open. We'd love to work with you. The timing wasn't right. Beginning of the year, I just said, hey, Kate and Jay, I think the time's right. I'm having a kid. I want to bring my team over. You guys are great. I have this other big project we can't do just by ourselves.
Right on.
And it's with it's with a car company, and I can't do this. So they all helped pitch it together. We won it. And I said, let's transition this over. And I know my wife's gonna like this a lot better. I need my weekends back. And yeah, it's been great so far. We're definitely still in the honeymoon stage, but I love it. So much creative energy over there. Covington's like this weird, like little Brooklyn to Cincinnati. There's a lot of great things going on there.
Yeah.
For me, I'm learning a lot there as far as like, I don't know Covington. I want to know its history. I want to dig into that stuff.
This is a town in Kentucky right across the Ohio River from Cincinnati. I mean, if that building wasn't there, we could probably see it. Correct. But it's basically within the Cincinnati metro.
Yeah.
And BLDG it's a design shop.
Yeah, a lot of heavy on branding. They have processes, they have strategy, they have 20 some people there. I didn't have that.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of sort of like rebels that we held our hand up and we're like, let's go battle, let's go figure this stuff out. Love that passion, able to bring that passion to them, bringing kind of clients together too that now actually kind of can do more with the clients I had with 3 or 4 people, now with 20. So I think, to quote Michael Scott, it's a win-win-win situation right now. It's a lot of fun, It's really interesting, the design world to kind of see, how different people do different things. So yeah, I think there's some learning curves with different things with that, and not every day is perfect, but I'm really looking forward to the opportunity of a new challenge that, hey, I don't have to go and fight and scream at the client every day now. Now I go, Jay, you can do that, and he's like, all right, he's better at it than I am. So
well, it's cool because there's seasons to all of that stuff, and it's like you've been being that solo entrepreneur and then creating a place for a handful of people to come. And now you've broadened the opportunity to them, and now you get to sort of like actually sit back and be a designer and a creative director again and not have to worry about all that crap for a little while. Yeah,
and what's really cool is I'm starting to see, that as we talked about earlier, that sort of mentoring and coaching will kind of come back. Yeah. And now I'm seeing things where like younger kids are coming to Cincinnati, coming to Covington, Newport, surrounding areas of Cincinnati to say, hey, there's opportunity here again. And what are these little shops doing here in town? And there's, it's really kind of cool to, look at a younger designer and give them a little sprinkling of, hey, maybe go in this direction. And then you see this like crazy, amazing thing. And you're like, man, that's what it's about, Right
on. Getting that satisfaction, not necessarily just from your own work.
Yeah, it's like a team. Yeah, I've been on an island a lot in the last, decade with stuff, good and bad. Was able to work a lot with like artworks and the kids there to do murals and seeing that. That's when you see a team of kids on a wall painting a mural and you're like, oh my gosh, if I was 16, like I would have loved to do that for a summer. But those opportunities in Cincinnati that are here, that I think creatives now are taking advantage of. And the companies here know that, hey, we got to do creative stuff to keep them in town, or it's going to go back to where it was. Right. So it's an investment by the big coast here too, and a lot of startup stuff happening. And I think we're still all trying to figure out processes with that stuff, but I'm really seeing like the design community, especially with like Blink, being able to come together and figure out some really cool stuff that, gets like even my parents excited. So that's cool.
We should explain a little bit what Blink is for people that weren't here, although apparently you were all here. Because there were something like 7 million people, downtown. It's
crazy.
Like 1.5 million or 2 million people or whatever. Blink is, I don't even know how to sum it up. Blink is it was the second year this year. It just ended 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's an interactive art and...
Yeah, there's lots of projection mapping throughout the whole town.
I don't know how to describe it. I'm sure they have their language down.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just like a light festival. There's a parade. There's lots of different like art and design communities involved, from like grade school, like with parades and stuff, to, seasoned veterans doing like projection mapping. Murals are going up. Lots of big names in like the mural community.
You kind of spearheaded a lot of, so Blink was an outcome of, or an offshoot of Luminosity, which happened for a few years here in Cincinnati.
Right.
And you were, to my knowledge, so Luminosity was a location-based. It was originally was in one place.
Yep.
And
Music Hall. Yep.
Doing projection mapping on Music Hall, which is the huge historic Cincinnati performance space for the symphony and for the ballet.
Yep.
Amazing stuff. The Charlie Harper stuff that you did.
Thank you.
I mean, just gorgeous, gorgeous stuff. And we'll link to, I'm sure there's stuff out there on the web. I'll find some YouTube stuff or whatever, and we'll link to it on the website, because this is stuff that you got to see. And then Luminosity became sort of morphed into this less specific location-based and more all throughout the city-based projection mapping and art festival that is just mind-blowing.
It's pretty crazy that, to be able to work with Steve and Dan at Bray Berlin early on with this stuff, and still to kind of be invited back to do a lot of the projection mapping stuff. And it's storytelling, right?
Yeah.
And for my piece this year, it was called Alienati. It was all about things that happen in Cincinnati because of aliens. If you've ever seen Ancient Aliens, it's kind of a homage to that, but also like looking at like what makes things great is because aliens were here long before we were. So kind of tongue-in-cheek, a lot of fun, a lot of like big, bright colors, animation stuff with that. But yeah, kind of, and what's funny is those two guys got me my first agency job at FRCH down there. So like we've kind of been, this love affair back and forth throughout the years, loving their work, and still just kind of, being able to collaborate. And that's the key, right? And a lot of people talk about collaboration in the design world, but I think Cincinnati's really starting to do a great job at that, being able to get, artists, designers, painters together to create something bigger than themselves, whether it's even a weekend project to something that takes, millions of dollars to pull off like a Blink. But it's nice to kind of, get recognized and be a part of that stuff for sure.
What's cool that I see, and it parallels your story, is I see Cincinnati in the agency world, pitching for big business. We would always hear like the Midwest Nice moniker. It was difficult to punch up and win those big accounts. Now I see Cincinnati moving out of that place of sort of the insecurity of we don't know who we are. Yes, we maybe aren't paying as much attention to our history as we should and to our legacy, but even that is coming back.
Yes.
And now just being like, no, we can do great work. We can do kick-ass work.
Yeah.
We can do something that draws people from all over the place. And it also, it's really funny because you were talking about like that bold line style.
Yeah.
Like so much of what I'm seeing now visually coming through, not just in Blink, but all over the place, is this sort of bringing back of older illustration-based styles and styles of visual art that have soul to them.
Yeah.
That couldn't be just generated by an algorithm, but they need to be drawn and created by a person.
Yeah.
And it seems like those things, just like music comes back around, design comes back around, and you're seeing a lot of that filtering its way back into the visual design community and what people are like really having an appetite for in their art.
Yeah, it has to. I mean, things have to come back around again to realize the importance of it.
Yeah.
And the history of that stuff, we're starting to understand. Like King Records, it's not just James Brown. There was hundreds of artists that made great work that changed the dynamic of Black and white America to create not just rock and roll, but other genres of music. And it's just insane. There's not talking to Otis Williams from Otis Williams and the Charms, he described to me how when he was dancing on stage for like the first time, kids were looking at his eyes, but they were looking at his feet, looking at his eyes, looking at his feet, and he's inventing choreography. I mean, this happened here. This is a high school kid, Withrow High School here. I mean, that's insane, #1 hit. But those things happen here. And I try to fuse those great history and stories back into my art because that's what gets me excited. And I think if I get excited, somebody else will, and hopefully somebody else will see that and want to get inspired by or pay for it or whatever, So,
which is all the
important
stuff that keeps it going. And
Yeah.
you were talking about the kids who you're being a mentor for now. I mean, I know 2 kids. Henry Heist, who was working with the artwork stuff, who's participated in a lot of those murals.
Yeah.
Who's a 17-year-old who went to school with my son, who's now like finding a place for his art.
That's awesome.
And one of his best friends, Owen Gunderman, who maybe I shouldn't. He's a street artist. He's doing amazing stuff. You can follow him. I'll link to his Instagram. He would love that. He goes by the name Tenzing for his street art.
He blew up. He blew up at Blink. Yes.
Yeah. His stuff is great.
Yeah,
and it's this
good.
kid that I knew when he was in 3rd grade.
I didn't know that. That's so awesome.
Yeah, and he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm sending him messages on Instagram. Like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen.
I love that the community saw this kid and was like, get up here, do it.
Yeah.
And he wasn't.
And he's working with
he
his
wasn't
idols
like,
now.
maybe not. He jumped right in and did it.
Yeah.
And that is that's Cincinnati, because that is like a little chip on the shoulder, but I'm gonna do this. I'm not in New York, but I'm gonna jump up. I'm gonna do this. I'm seeing my friends, and they literally held him up when
I
they
saw
won.
that.
It's
so
sweet.
sweet.
The secret wall guys are awesome. And I was fortunate enough to talk to the London Police, Gallows, some of these guys who invited him up there afterwards, and they were just as excited to do that with him as he was. So that was a big highlight for Blink for me, seeing that with him.
I love it. It's so good. It brings it all back around.
That's so cool.
Man, this has been wonderful. I love your story. I love getting a little insight into what
thank
you're doing.
you. Thank you.
And I appreciate you taking the time on an early Thursday morning and coming out for a cup of coffee.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure, buddy. Thank you.
Awesome.
This episode of The Distiller was recorded live at Fausto, serving West Coast-inspired, locally sourced seasonal fare inside the Cincinnati Contemporary Arts Center at 44 East 6th Street in downtown Cincinnati. Thanks to Fausto's Jamie Clemento for inviting us in, and our server Brooklyn for taking great care of us. Fausto is open for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, and the setting inside the amazing CAC, which is one of my favorite places in Cincinnati, can't be beat. We'll link to Fausto and the CAC's websites and social media pages on our website. Stop by, say hi to the crew, and tell them you heard it on The Distiller when you do. Huge thanks to my guest Jason Snell for sharing his work with us. Jason's creative work spans genres, from his client work with BLDG to his art to his band Ohio Knife. We've got links to as much of it as we could track down on our website at thedistillerpodcast.com, where you'll also find links and information about Blink, about the local street artist Tenzing that we talked about at the end of the show. And all of that, along with photos by Angie Lipscomb of our time together, is on our website at thedistillerpodcast.com. The Distiller is produced, recorded, and hosted by me, Brandon Dawson. Our show is mixed and edited by Justin Golden. Logo development by Scott Ryan. Design, video work by Mike Helm of Minute Moments Pictures. You can find The Distiller wherever you listen to podcasts. Listen and download every episode of The Distiller at thedistillerpodcast.com, where you'll find links, photos of the guests, and a map of all the show locations. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell someone about it. Follow, like, and share our posts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you want to help us make more of these episodes, just click the Become a Patron button on our website for more information. We do want to say a sincere and enduring thanks to our existing patrons. Thank you for helping us make The Distiller a reality. And finally, please take a second to rate and review The Distiller wherever you listen. Until next time, I'm Brandon Dawson. Thank you for listening to The Distiller. Bye-bye.